The salt air of Piraeus hung heavy over the narrow streets, mixing with the acrid scent of cigarette smoke and diesel fuel from the ships docked at the port. Helena Papadakis wiped down the last table at Café Thalassa, her hands moving mechanically as her mind wandered to places she'd rather forget. The clock above the bar showed 11:30. Closing time couldn't come soon enough. At 25, Helena had perfected the art of invisibility. She kept her head down, her honey blonde hair always tied back in a practical ponytail, her movements efficient and unremarkable. The regulars barely noticed her anymore, which was exactly how she wanted it. After what happened 2 years ago, anonymity was survival. She had come to Athens with nothing but a duffel bag and a heart full of regrets, running from a past that threatened to swallow her whole. The small apartment she rented above a bakery in the old quarter was sparse but safe. Or so she thought. The cafe owner, old Stavros, locked the front door and bid her good night in his gravelly voice. Helena gathered her worn leather bag and stepped into the alley behind the building, where the amber glow of a single streetlight barely penetrated the darkness. The sound of her footsteps echoed off the ancient stone walls. She sensed him before she saw him. A shadow detached itself from the doorway across the narrow street. Helena's breath caught in her throat as recognition hit her like a physical blow. Dmitri Vasilakis, the man she'd once loved, the man who'd destroyed everything. Helena. His voice was smooth, almost apologetic, but his eyes were cold. "We need to talk." She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and ran. Her sneakers slapped against the cobblestones as she sprinted through the maze of alleys, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, Dimitri's footsteps grew louder, more urgent. She knew these streets well enough to navigate them in the dark, but panic made her clumsy. She stumbled over an uneven stone, caught herself, kept running. "You can't hide from this," Dimitri called out. "You know too much, Helena. They'll never stop looking." A shot cracked through the night air. White-hot pain exploded in Helena's left side just below her ribs. She gasped, her hand instinctively pressing against the wound as warmth spread across her shirt. Another shot splintered the wooden door beside her head. Her legs threatened to give out, but survival instinct pushed her forward. Through blurring vision, she saw light spilling from a warehouse entrance ahead. Without thinking, she threw herself toward it, bursting through the heavy door and stumbling into a world that would change everything. The space was cavernous, illuminated by hanging industrial lights that cast everything in gold and shadow. Expensive cars lined one wall: Mercedes, BMW, a gleaming black Maserati. Men in dark suits turned at her entrance, hands moving toward concealed weapons. But it was the man standing in the center who commanded every molecule of her attention. Nicholas Drakos. She'd heard the name whispered in fear and reverence throughout Piraeus. The Greek Mafia boss. The man who controlled everything from shipping routes to politicians. From the docks to the mountains of Corinto. He was younger than she'd imagined. Perhaps 38. But everything about him radiated power and danger. His black hair was styled in a perfect slicked-back cut, the kind that cost more than she made in a month. Dark ink marked the left side of his neck in elegant patterns that disappeared beneath his collar, where 2 buttons hung open, revealing a sculpted chest and more artwork across his skin. A gold Rolex caught the light on his wrist. A thin chain with a single pendant rested against his collarbone. His tailored black shirt fit his muscular frame like it was painted on. Helena's knees buckled. She hit the concrete floor hard, her hand pressed against the wound that was now bleeding freely through her fingers. The pain was excruciating, but worse was the humiliation of being here, of bringing violence to this man's doorstep. Nicholas was beside her in 3 long strides. She hadn't even seen him move. He crouched down, his dark eyes, almost black in the dim light, assessing her with an intensity that made her feel exposed despite her clothes. "Who did this?" His voice was controlled, each word precise and dangerous. Helena tried to speak, but only a whimper escaped. Blood seeped between her fingers no matter how hard she pressed. "Get Andreas," Nicholas barked to someone behind him, never taking his eyes off her. "And lock down the perimeter." Someone followed her here. His hand moved to cover hers, applying firm pressure to the wound. The pain made her vision swim, but his touch was surprisingly gentle despite the strength in those fingers. "Look at me," he commanded softly. When she didn't respond immediately, his other hand cupped her jaw, forcing her gaze to meet his. "Look. At. Me." Helena's brown eyes locked with his. In that moment, with death whispering in her ear, and this dangerous stranger holding her life in his hands, something passed between them, a recognition neither could name. "Tell me his name," Nicholas ordered, his voice low and absolutely certain. "The man who shot you. Tell me his name, and I'll make sure he never hurts you again." She wanted to. God, she wanted to say Dimitri's name and let this powerful man erase him from existence. But shame choked the words in her throat. Because Dimitri wasn't just some random attacker. He was her mistake. Her ex-boyfriend. The undercover cop she'd fallen in love with, who'd used her connection to people in Piraeus to gather intelligence, who'd betrayed her trust so completely that she'd had to flee her entire life. And now he'd found her. And he'd led violence straight to Nicholas Drakos' door. "I can't," she whispered, tears mixing with the sweat on her face. "I'm sorry. I can't." Something flickered in Nicholas's eyes. Not anger, but curiosity. Maybe even understanding. A man approached with a medical kit, but Nicholas waved him back for a moment. "You will tell me," he said, not as a threat, but as a simple fact. "When you're ready, you will tell me everything. But first, we keep you alive." He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest as he strode toward a back room. Helena's head fell against his shoulder, her consciousness fading at the edges. The last thing she registered before darkness claimed her was the scent of expensive cologne and gunpowder, and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her cheek. In that warehouse in Piraeus, as the Greek Mafia boss carried a bleeding stranger to safety, neither of them knew that a single bullet had just set in motion a love story that would reshape both their worlds. Helena woke to white walls and the antiseptic smell of medical supplies. Pain radiated from her side in waves, but it was manageable, nothing like the searing agony she remembered. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "Don't move." The voice came from the corner of the room. Nicholas sat in a leather chair, one ankle crossed over his knee, watching her with those penetrating dark eyes. He'd changed clothes, now wearing a charcoal gray suit with the jacket draped over the chairback, his white shirt still open at the collar, revealing the intricate inkwork that seemed to flow like water across his skin. "Where am I?" Her voice came out hoarse. "Somewhere safe." He stood and approached the bed, his movements fluid and controlled. Andreas removed the bullet. "You were lucky. It missed anything vital. You'll be sore for a while, but you'll live." Helena closed her eyes. Lucky. She'd never felt less lucky in her entire life. "You still haven't told me his name." Nicholas pulled a chair closer to the bedside and sat, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. The gold of his watch caught the afternoon light streaming through the window. "But you're going to. Because whoever he is, he knows where to find you. And now he knows you came to me." "You don't understand," Helena said, her voice breaking. "This is my fault, all of it. I brought this to your door. I should leave before..." "Before what? Before he finishes what he started?" Nicholas's jaw tightened. "You're not leaving. Not until I know what I'm dealing with." She studied his face, the sharp angles, the full lips that seemed built for cruelty, but held a surprising softness at the edges, the shadow of stubble that made him look both dangerous and devastatingly handsome, His hair remained perfectly styled despite the hours that must have passed. Everything about him screamed wealth, power, control. "Dmitri Vasilakis," she finally whispered. "His name is Dmitri Vasilakis." Nicholas went very still. The police informant. It wasn't a question. Helena's stomach dropped. "You know him?" "I know of him." Nicholas stood abruptly, pulling his phone from his pocket and walking to the window. "He's been trying to infiltrate my organization for 2 years. We've lost 3 shipments and had 2 of my men arrested because of information he fed to the authorities." He turned back to her, and now there was steel in his gaze. "Tell me everything." So she did. The words tumbled out. How she'd met Dmitri 3 years ago at a bar in Kolonaki. How he'd courted her with flowers and poetry. How he'd slowly, carefully extracted information about the people she knew. The neighborhood connections her late father had maintained. She'd been naive, desperate for love after losing both parents within a year of each other. She hadn't realized she was being used until it was too late. "When I found out what he really was, I confronted him," Helena continued, her hands twisting the blanket. "He told me if I said anything to anyone, he'd make sure I went to prison as an accessory. He had recordings of our conversations, photos of me with people he claimed were criminals. I didn't know who to trust, so I ran. Changed my name from Papadakis to Koutsolis, dyed my hair, moved to Piraeus. I thought I'd finally disappeared." Nicholas returned to his chair, his expression unreadable. "But he found you." "Someone must have recognized me. Maybe at the cafe. I don't know." She met his eyes. "I never meant for any of this to touch you. I just needed somewhere to hide. You chose my warehouse. I chose light. I chose people. I didn't know it was yours." A long silence stretched between them. Helena waited for his anger, for him to throw her out, or worse. Instead, he did something that surprised her. He laughed. It was a dark sound, but genuine. "The universe has a strange sense of humor," he said. "The woman who stumbles bleeding into my operation is connected to the rat who's been costing me millions." He stood again, buttoning his cuffs with precise movements. "But I believe you. I don't know why, but I do." "What are you going to do?" Helena asked, fear making her voice small. Nicholas adjusted the ring on his right hand, a heavy gold piece with a family crest. "First, I'm going to make sure Dmitri doesn't find you. Second, I'm going to figure out who in his department is feeding him information about my movements. And third," he paused, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "Third, I'm going to keep you close until I understand why a woman I've known for less than 12 hours matters more to me than she should." Before Helena could process that statement, the door opened and a woman in her 50s entered carrying a tray of food. She had kind eyes and a maternal presence that immediately put Helena at ease. "You need to eat," the woman said in Greek, setting the tray on the bedside table. "Andreas says you lost a lot of blood. This will help." Nicholas spoke to the woman in rapid Greek, then switched back to English for Helena's benefit. "This is Maria. She'll look after you. Rest, eat, heal. We'll talk more tomorrow." He moved toward the door, but Helena's voice stopped him. "Why are you helping me? I'm nobody. I'm the reason your operation was compromised." Nicholas turned, his hand on the doorframe. The light from the hallway backlit him, making him look almost otherworldly. "You want the truth? I saw something in your eyes when I found you bleeding on my floor. Something I haven't seen in a very long time in this world I live in." He paused. "You were more afraid of telling me that name than you were of dying. That kind of loyalty, misplaced as it was, is rare. And in my business, rare things are valuable. I wasn't being loyal to you. No. You were protecting yourself from shame, from judgment. Even while bleeding out, you were trying to carry your burden alone. His voice softened almost imperceptibly. I understand that impulse better than you know. After he left, Helena stared at the closed door for a long time. Maria bustled about, fluffing pillows and adjusting the IV drip that Andreas had insisted on leaving in place. Through the window, Helena could see mountains in the distance. They'd left Athens then. This was somewhere remote. Safe. She touched the bandage on her side carefully. The bullet that should have killed her had instead led her to the most dangerous man in Greece. A man who looked at her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. A man whose protection felt more substantial than anything she'd known since her parents died. Helena had spent 2 years trying to disappear. Now, lying in a bed in a safe house owned by the Greek Mafia, protected by a man with murder in his reputation, and something unexpectedly gentle in his eyes, she realized that maybe she'd been found instead. And for the first time since Dmitri had shattered her world, she didn't feel entirely alone. 3 days passed in a blur of healing and discovery. The safe house turned out to be a villa, perched in the mountains of Corinto, with whitewashed walls and blue shutters that overlooked the Corinthian Gulf. It was beautiful, isolated, and utterly removed from the world Helena had known. Maria proved to be more than a caretaker. She was Nicholas's former nanny, a woman who'd raised him after his mother died when he was 7. She spoke freely about him, painting a picture that didn't quite match the fearsome reputation. He was such a serious boy, Maria said while changing Helena's bandages. Always reading, always watching. His father wanted him to be strong, so he taught him to be hard. But underneath? She tapped her chest. Still that boy who cried when his dog died. Helena tried to reconcile that image with the man who'd carried her bleeding through his warehouse, who commanded absolute authority with nothing but his voice and presence. It didn't quite fit. Nicholas visited every evening. He'd arrive as the sun set, bringing the scent of the city with him. Expensive cologne, cigarettes he didn't smoke but his men did, and something else, something uniquely him that Helena found herself anticipating. He'd sit in the chair by her bed, still impeccably dressed despite the long days, his slicked back hair never out of place, and they'd talk, not about the obvious things, not about Dmitri or the danger that still lurked beyond these walls. Instead, he asked about her childhood in Thessaloniki, about her parents who'd run a small bookshop, about the degree in literature she'd abandoned when they died, and surprisingly, he shared pieces of himself too. My father built this empire from nothing, Nicholas said one evening, his fingers absently tracing the pattern on his gold ring. He was ruthless because he had to be. The world he came from didn't reward kindness. It rewarded strength. And you? Helena asked. Did you choose this life or inherit it? His dark eyes found hers, and something flickered there. Regret, maybe, or resignation. Is there a difference? I was raised knowing that one day all of this would be mine. The question was never if I'd take it, but whether I'd survive it long enough to matter. That's a lonely way to grow up. Lonely keeps you alive. He leaned back, the chair creaking slightly under his muscular frame. Trust gets you killed. Then why are you trusting me? Nicholas was quiet for a long moment. Outside, crickets sang their evening song, and the breeze through the open window carried the scent of jasmine. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more intimate. I don't know. Logic says I shouldn't. You're a liability. A connection to a man who wants to destroy everything I've built. But when I look at you... He trailed off, seeming to struggle with the words. When I look at you, I see someone who's been hurt by the same forces that shaped me. Different circumstances, same result. You understand what it means to survive when the world wants you broken. Helena's breath caught. She'd been trying not to think about how aware she was of him, the way his presence filled whatever space he occupied, the unexpected gentleness in his hands when he helped her stand to walk around the room, the heat that sparked when their eyes met. This was dangerous territory. He was a mafia boss. She was running from a past that could destroy them both. But God, when he looked at her like that, none of the logical reasons to keep her distance seemed to matter. On the fourth day, Helena was strong enough to walk the villa's grounds with only minimal pain. Nicholas arrived earlier than usual, dressed in dark jeans and a fitted black Henley that showed off the full extent of the artwork, decorating his arms and chest. Without the formal suits, he looked younger, more dangerous, and impossibly more attractive. "Walk with me," he said. They made their way through the garden, past bougainvillea that cascaded in purple waterfalls and olive trees that had probably stood for centuries. Helena noticed the security cameras hidden among the branches, the men stationed discreetly at the perimeter. Even here, in this beautiful sanctuary, danger was never far away. "I've found Dmitri," Nicholas said without preamble. Helena stopped walking. "Where?" "Still in Athens. He's been looking for you, asking questions in Piraeus. Getting sloppy, actually. Desperate." Nicholas turned to face her, his hands in his pockets. "My sources say he's in trouble with his handlers. The information he provided about my organization has dried up since you disappeared. They think he's lost his edge." "Because I was his edge," Helena said bitterly. "I was how he got close to people. Yes, and now he needs you back, either to use you again or to eliminate you as a loose end." Nicholas's jaw tightened. "I won't let either happen." "How can you stop him? He's a cop. He has resources, protection. And I have something he doesn't." Nicholas stepped closer, close enough that Helena had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "I have you, and I know how to protect what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it sent warmth flooding through her chest. "I'm not yours." "Aren't you?" His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her lower lip with devastating gentleness. "You've been here 4 days. You could have asked to leave, could have demanded I take you to a hospital, to the police, anywhere else. But you stayed. Why?" Helena couldn't answer. Because the truth was terrifying. She'd stayed because here, in this villa with this dangerous man, she felt safer than she had in years. Because when he looked at her, she felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with the information she could provide or the connections she could offer. Because somewhere in the last 4 days, Nicholas Drakos had stopped being the Greek mafia boss and had become simply Nicholas, the man who brought her tea exactly how she liked it, who listened to her talk about books with genuine interest, who smiled when he thought she wasn't looking. "I stayed because you make me feel like I matter," she finally whispered. Something raw and unguarded flashed across his features. His hand slid from her cheek to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. "You do matter. More than you should. More than is wise." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her lips. "I've killed men for less reason than what Dmitri did to you. I should want you here only to use as bait, to draw him out and end this. But instead, all I can think about is keeping you safe, keeping you here, keeping you." Nicholas. Whatever she meant to say was cut off by his lips on hers. The kiss was electric, consuming, filled with weeks of tension compressed into days. His mouth moved against hers with practiced skill, but underlying hunger, and Helena found herself pressing closer despite the pull of her healing wound. His other arm wrapped around her waist, careful of her injury, but firm enough to eliminate any space between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nicholas rested his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake," he said roughly. "You should be terrified of me." "I know." Helena's hands had found their way to his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath her palms. "But I'm not," Should I be? He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. I've done terrible things, Helena. I've ordered deaths. I've hurt people. The man you're kissing is not a good man. And the man who sat by my bed every night, who makes sure Maria brings me books to read, who looks at me like I'm something precious. She held his gaze. Is he a good man? He's trying to be, for you. Which might be the most dangerous thing of all. Nicholas released her slowly, taking a step back. Because if something happens to you because of me, because of this world I live in, I'm not sure what I'd become. They stood in the garden as the sun set over the Corinthian Gulf, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Helena touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. She knew this was madness, knew that falling for Nicholas Drakos was like dancing at the edge of a cliff. But she'd spent 2 years living in fear, making herself small, denying herself any chance at connection. And now, with this dangerous, complicated man looking at her like she was his salvation, she was tired of running. So what do we do about Dmitri? She asked, choosing action over fear. Nicholas's expression hardened, the softer man from moments ago disappearing behind the Mafia boss. We use you as bait. We draw him out. And we end this permanently. You want to kill him. I want to eliminate a threat to something I care about. Yes. His eyes met hers, unflinching. Can you accept that? Helena thought about Dmitri, about his betrayal, about the bullet he'd put in her, about the 2 years she'd lost because of his manipulations. She thought about the life she might have if he was gone, if she could stop running and start living again. Yes, she said quietly. I can accept that. Nicholas nodded once, then extended his hand. Then let's go inside. We have plans to make. As Helena placed her hand in his, feeling the strength in his grip and the warmth of his skin, she realized she'd crossed a line. Whatever happened next, whatever price they'd have to pay, she was no longer a victim of her circumstances. She was making a choice, and her choice was him. The plan was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its execution. They would let word slip through carefully selected channels that Helena was alive and willing to meet Dmitri, that she had information he needed, that she wanted to trade her silence for her freedom. The meeting would take place at an abandoned warehouse near the port in Piraeus, a location Dmitri would believe he could control, but it would be Nicholas's territory all along. He'll bring back up, Nicholas said as they reviewed the blueprints of the warehouse in his study. 3 other men stood around the table: Andreas, who'd removed her bullet, Stavros, Nicholas's second-in-command, and Theo, his head of security. All of them studied Helena with a mixture of skepticism and grudging respect. He won't trust that you're alone, even if you tell him you are, Andreas added, pointing to several positions on the map. He'll have men positioned here, and probably a sniper on this rooftop. So we position ours first, Nicholas said, his voice calm and authoritative. Theo, I want eyes on every entrance 48 hours before the meet. I want to know every move they make before they make it. Helena watched him work, marveling at the transformation. This was Nicholas Drakos in his element, commanding, strategic, absolutely in control. His hands moved over the blueprints with confidence, his mind 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. The expensive watch on his wrist caught the light as he gestured, and the ring on his finger, the one with his family crest, seemed to carry the weight of generations. And if something goes wrong? She asked, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. All 4 men turned to look at her. It was Nicholas who answered. Nothing will go wrong. I'll have 20 men positioned throughout the warehouse. You'll wear a wire. The moment Dmitri confirms anything incriminating, or makes a move toward you, we take him. You mean kill him. I mean neutralize the threat. Nicholas's eyes held hers across the table. You don't need to be in the room when that happens. The moment we have what we need, Thea will get you out." "No." Helena straightened her shoulders, ignoring the twinge from her still healing wound. "I stay until it's done. He shot me. He used me. He gets to see that I survived him." Stavros let out a low whistle. "She's got fire, boss. I like her." "Everyone out," Nicholas said quietly. "Now." The three men filed out without argument, though Andreas shot Helena a warning look on his way past. When the door closed, Nicholas remained standing on the opposite side of the desk, his hands braced against the polished wood. "You don't understand what you're asking," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "When we move on Dmitri, it won't be clean. It won't be quick. You don't need to see what I'm capable of when someone threatens what's mine." "I'm not fragile, Nicholas." Helena moved around the desk until she stood directly in front of him. "I'm not some porcelain doll that needs to be protected from reality. I know what you are, what you do, and I'm choosing to be here anyway." His jaw clenched. "You think you know. But knowing and seeing are different things. I've watched men who thought they were prepared fall apart when confronted with violence. I watched my father die," Helena interrupted, her voice sharp. "Cancer ate him alive over 18 months. I held his hand while he screamed in pain, while the morphine stopped working, while he begged for death. I know what suffering looks like. I know what it means to keep standing when everything in you wants to break." She stepped closer. "Don't you dare patronize me by assuming I can't handle this." Something shifted in Nicholas's expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. He reached out, his hand cupping her face with that devastating gentleness that seemed at odds with everything else about him. "I'm not trying to protect you because I think you're weak. I'm trying to protect you because if something happens to you, I won't be the man you think I am anymore. I'll be the monster everyone says I am." Helena leaned into his touch. "Then make sure nothing happens to me." He kissed her then, harder than before, with an edge of desperation that spoke to the fear they were both trying to ignore. His hands moved to her waist, lifting her onto the desk, and Helena wrapped her legs around him, needing him closer, needing to feel alive in the face of the violence they were planning. "Helena?" He breathed against her neck, his lips tracing the line of her jaw. "If we do this, if we go through with this plan, there's no going back. You'll be tied to me, to this life, forever." "I know." She threaded her fingers through his perfectly styled hair, finally disrupting those slicked-back strands. "I'm not asking to go back. I'm asking to move forward. With you." They made love there in his study, with the blueprints of their dangerous plans spread beneath them, with the weight of tomorrow pressing down but pushed aside for these stolen moments. Nicholas was surprisingly tender, mindful of her healing wound, his touches reverent despite the hunger between them. And Helena discovered that surrendering to this man, this dangerous, complicated, unexpectedly gentle man, felt less like falling and more like finally finding solid ground. Afterward, as they lay tangled together on the leather couch, Helena traced the ink on his chest, elaborate designs that incorporated Greek symbols and family crests, each one telling a story he'd never fully explained. "Tell me about these," she said softly. Nicholas's fingers were drawing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "The omega here," he touched his left pectoral, "represents the end and the beginning. My father gave me this empire at the end of his life, and it became the beginning of mine." He moved her hand to his ribs. "This is the Dracos family crest, my grandfather's symbol. A dragon coiled around a sword, power through strength. And this?" Helena touched a smaller design over his heart, a single olive branch. "That one's newer." His voice was quieter now. "I got it after my last relationship ended, a reminder that even in war, there should be room for peace, for something gentler." He pulled her closer. I never thought I'd find it until you stumbled bleeding into my warehouse." "I'm not gentle," Helena protested. "No, you're strong. There's a difference." He tilted her face up to kiss her forehead. "Gentleness requires strength. The weak can't afford to be gentle." 2 days later, as Helena prepared for the meeting with Dmitri, she replayed those words in her mind. She dressed in simple clothes, jeans and a dark sweater, and tried not to think about the vest Theo insisted she wear beneath it. Tried not to think about the wire taped to her skin, or the small earpiece hidden in her ear. Nicholas found her in her room, staring at herself in the mirror. He stood behind her, his hands on her shoulders, and they looked at their reflections together. "You don't have to do this," he said one more time. "Yes, I do." Helena turned to face him. "For both of us." He kissed her with a tenderness that felt like goodbye, though neither of them said the word. "Stay near Theo. The moment anything feels wrong, you run. You don't wait for my signal. You don't try to be brave. You run, and you let us handle it. Promise me." "I promise." It was a lie, and they both knew it. But sometimes love meant accepting the lies we tell to keep each other sane. As they drove toward Piraeus in separate cars, Helena with Theo, Nicholas with his men, the sun was setting over the Corinthian Gulf one more time, painting the sky in the same oranges and golds as that evening in the garden when they'd first kissed. Helena watched it from the window and thought about beginnings and endings, about omega symbols and olive branches, about the strange path that had led a bookshop owner's daughter into the arms of the Greek Mafia. The warehouse came into view, dark and looming against the twilight sky. Somewhere inside, Dmitri was waiting. And somewhere in the shadows, Nicholas was positioning his pieces for endgame. Helena touched the bandage still covering her wound beneath the bulletproof vest. The bullet that should have killed her had instead led her here, to this moment, this choice, this dangerous love that defied every logical reason to walk away. She stepped out of the car into the cooling evening air. Theo moved beside her, his hand near his concealed weapon. And as Helena walked toward the warehouse entrance, she realized she wasn't afraid. She was ready for this to end. The warehouse was exactly as the blueprints had shown, a cavernous space filled with shipping containers and shadows, lit by industrial lights that created pools of amber illumination, broken by stretches of darkness. Helena's footsteps echoed on the concrete as she walked deeper inside, her heart hammering but her expression calm. "Helena." Dimitri's voice came from somewhere to her left, and then he stepped into the light. He looked different from her memories, thinner, with shadows under his eyes and a desperate edge to his movements. He wore a leather jacket and jeans, trying to look casual, but she could see the bulge of a weapon at his hip. Behind him, 2 other men emerged from the shadows. Not cops, hired muscle. He'd come outside official channels. That was the first sign that Nicholas had been right. Dmitri was desperate, acting on his own. "You look well," Dmitri said, his eyes scanning her body with clinical assessment. "I heard you were dead." "You heard wrong." Helena stopped about 20 feet away, keeping distance between them as Theo had instructed. "You're a terrible shot." A flash of anger crossed his features. "You shouldn't have run. You made everything so much more complicated." "Complicated?" Helena's voice rose despite her attempts to stay calm. "You shot me, Dmitri. You used me, lied to me, threatened me, and then tried to kill me. How was I supposed to make that simple?" "By understanding this was bigger than you, bigger than us." He took a step forward, and Helena heard the crackle in her earpiece, Nicholas's voice, barely a whisper. "Hold position. Let him talk." "I needed you," Dmitri continued, his voice taking on that persuasive tone she remembered from their relationship. "The information you had access to, the connections through your father's old friends. It was crucial for taking down some very dangerous people. But you got emotional. You made it personal. You made it personal when you lied about loving me. Did I? He smiled, and it was cruel. Are you sure? Maybe I did love you, Helena. Maybe I still do. Maybe that's why I'm giving you this chance to fix what you broke. In her ear, Nicholas's voice came again, harder this time. Get him to admit to the shooting, on record. A chance to fix it? Helena kept her voice steady. You shot me, Dimitri. 2 weeks ago, outside Café Thalassa. You tried to murder me. I was trying to protect you. Dimitri spread his hands. You were getting too close to dangerous people. I followed you that night to warn you, and when you ran, I panicked. The shot was meant to stop you, not kill you. Bullshit. The word came out before she could stop it. You aimed for center mass. If you hadn't turned, we wouldn't be here. He took another step forward. But we are. And now you're going to tell me everything you know about Nicholas Drakos and his organization. You're going to give me what I need to finally bring him down. Behind the containers to her right, Helena sensed rather than saw movement. Nicholas's men getting into position. But Dimitri's men sensed it too. The 2 muscle-bound guys flanking him drew their weapons. Who's here with you? Dimitri demanded, his own hand moving toward his gun. Nobody, Helena lied, even as Theo materialized from the shadows, his weapon drawn. Drop it, Theo commanded. All of you, drop your weapons now. Everything happened at once. Dimitri's men opened fire. Theo shoved Helena behind a container, his body blocking hers as bullets pinged off metal. More of Nicholas's men emerged from the shadows, returning fire. The warehouse exploded into chaos, muzzle flashes in the darkness, the deafening crack of gunshots, shouts in Greek and English. Helena pressed herself against the cold metal of the container, her hands over her ears. This was what Nicholas had tried to spare her from, the reality of violence, the absolute mayhem of life and death happening in split seconds. Someone screamed. Glass shattered. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. Then she saw him. Nicholas, moving through the chaos like a dark angel, his weapon drawn, but his focus absolute. His eyes found hers across the warehouse, and even in the middle of the firefight, she saw the fear there. Fear for her, because of her. And she saw Dimitri see him too. You're with him? Dimitri's voice was incredulous, betrayed, as if he had any right to that emotion. He was crouched behind a container 15 feet away, his weapon raised. You're with Drakos? After everything I told you about him, about what he is? He's never lied to me, Helena shouted back. He's never pretended to be something he's not. He's a killer. So are you. She didn't know where the courage came from, but suddenly Helena was standing, stepping out from behind the container despite Theo's protests. You shot me. You would have killed me. Don't talk to me about morality when you've destroyed everything you touched. Dimitri's face twisted with rage. He raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Helena. You stupid bitch. You've ruined everything. Everything. Time seemed to slow. Helena saw Dimitri's finger tighten on the trigger. Saw Nicholas turning, his own weapon coming up but too far away, too many obstacles between them. Saw the muzzle flash as Dimitri fired. And then Nicholas was there. He'd crossed the impossible distance in seconds, throwing himself in front of Helena as the bullet left Dimitri's gun. The impact spun him around, and Helena watched in horror as blood bloomed across his white shirt, high on his left shoulder. He staggered but didn't fall, his own weapon rising to fire 3 times in rapid succession. Dimitri crumpled, the surprise on his face eternal as he hit the ground. Nicholas! Helena caught him as his knees buckled, her hands immediately pressing against the wound the way his had pressed against hers 2 weeks ago. Blood, so much blood, seeped between her fingers. No, 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 stay with me. Nicholas, look at me. His dark eyes found hers, and despite the pain etched across his features, he smiled. Told you, he breathed. Can't let anything happen to you. Around them, the shooting had stopped. Nicholas's men had subdued Dimitri's muscle. Theo was on the phone, calling for their private doctor. But all Helena could focus on was the man dying in her arms. The man who'd taken a bullet meant for her, just like she'd taken one that had led her to him. You're not allowed to die, she told him fiercely, her tears falling onto his face. Do you hear me? You don't get to save me and then leave me here alone. That's not how this works. Helena. His hand came up to touch her face, leaving a smear of blood across her cheek. The way I feel about you. It's worth it. No. No. It's not. Nothing is worth this. She pressed harder against the wound, trying to stem the bleeding. Andreas. Where's Andreas? The doctor pushed through the crowd of men, his medical bag already open. He took one look at the wound and started barking orders. They moved Nicholas to a cleared space, and Helena refused to let go of his hand even as Andreas cut away his shirt and began working to stop the bleeding. It's through and through, Andreas said after a tense examination. Missed the major arteries. He's lucky. The vest deflected it just enough to keep it from going deeper. Lucky, Helena repeated numbly. Nicholas was unconscious now, his face pale but his breathing steady. Lucky seemed like a cruel word for a man who'd just taken a bullet. Across the warehouse, under the cold industrial lights, Dimitri's body lay still. Dead or dying, Helena didn't care to check. The man who'd haunted her nightmares for 2 years was gone, eliminated by the man who'd become her waking dream. Theo approached, his expression grim. We need to move him, and we need to clean this up. The police will be here soon. Dimitri's handlers will have heard the shots. Helena nodded, still holding Nicholas's hand. Where? Back to the villa. Andreas can work on him there. Theo's hand landed on her shoulder, surprisingly gentle. He'll be okay, Helena. The boss is too stubborn to die. They loaded Nicholas into one of the cars, and Helena climbed in beside him, cradling his head in her lap as they sped through the Athens streets toward the mountains. Andreas worked on him during the drive, establishing an IV, monitoring his vitals, packing the wound. The sun had fully set now, and the city lights streaked past in a blur of gold and white. Helena stroked Nicholas's hair, finally disrupting that perfect, slicked-back style completely. His face in repose looked younger, more vulnerable. The tattoos on his chest and arms seemed like war paint now, decorations on a warrior who'd fought and bled for her. I love you, she whispered, not caring if he could hear her or not. I love you, and you don't get to leave me. We had a deal. You were going to keep me safe. Well, I'm safe now, so you need to wake up and see that you succeeded. His eyelids fluttered, and for a moment his dark eyes opened. Did we get him? He's dead. Helena's voice was steady. It's over. Good. His eyes closed again. Stay with me. Always, she promised. I'm not going anywhere. The villa appeared in the distance, lit up like a beacon in the darkness. Maria was waiting at the entrance, her face creased with worry. Together they moved Nicholas to his bedroom, a space Helena had never seen before, all dark wood and masculine elegance, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Gulf. Andreas spent the next 3 hours working on him, removing the bullet fragments, cleaning and stitching the wound, pumping him full of antibiotics and painkillers. Helena stayed nearby, her hands still stained with his blood, refusing Maria's gentle suggestions that she rest. Finally, near dawn, Andreas straightened from the bed. He's stable. The next 24 hours are critical. but I think he'll pull through. He needs rest, fluids, and monitoring for infection. He looked at Helena. You should sleep too. You're still healing yourself. But Helena just moved to the chair beside Nicholas's bed, the same chair he'd occupied by hers 2 weeks ago, and settled in to keep watch. She took his hand, carefully avoiding the IV lines, and pressed her lips to his knuckles. Outside, the sun began to rise over the Corinthian Gulf, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day, a new beginning. And Helena sat vigil over the man who'd given up everything to protect her, waiting for him to wake up so she could tell him what she should have said weeks ago. That he'd saved her in ways that had nothing to do with bullets and blood. That he'd given her back her life, her courage, her ability to love without fear. That whatever came next, whatever consequences they'd face for the violence of last night, she'd face them with him. Because the bullet that should have killed him had instead proven what Helena had already known in her heart. That Nicholas Drakos, the Greek Mafia boss, the man the world feared and judged, was capable of the purest kind of love, the kind worth dying for. And now, as dawn broke over their sanctuary, the kind worth living for too. 4 days passed before Nicholas fully regained consciousness. Helena spent every hour by his side, sleeping in the chair, eating whatever Maria brought her, monitoring his breathing like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to earth. Andreas came twice daily to check the wound, change the dressings, and pronounce him healing well. Stavros and Theo visited to report on the cleanup. Dimitri's death was being ruled self-defense by the authorities, helped by the wire recording that proved his intent to kill, and by certain well-placed officials in Nicholas's network. The other men had disappeared. As far as the world knew, a corrupt cop had died confronting the very criminals he'd been supposedly investigating. Justice, of a sort. When Nicholas finally opened his eyes, really opened them with full awareness, the sun was streaming through the windows, and Helena was dozing in her chair, her head resting on the edge of his bed. He reached out with his good arm and touched her hair, and she jolted awake. How long? His voice was rough from disuse. 4 days. Helena's hand immediately went to his forehead, checking for fever. Finding none, she sat back with a shaky exhale. You scared me. Sorry. He tried to sit up and winced. Remind me not to take bullets for beautiful women anymore. Too late. You already have a pattern. But she was smiling through her tears, helping him adjust the pillow so he could recline more comfortably. How do you feel? Like I got shot. He looked down at the bandages covering his shoulder and chest. Andreas says it was clean? Through and through. You were lucky. That word again. Nicholas reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. I don't feel lucky. I feel like an idiot for not positioning myself better, for letting Dimitri get that shot off. You saved my life. You saved mine first. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Fair trade. Helena shook her head. It's not a competition, Nicholas. No, it's not. He pulled her gently toward him, ignoring the pull on his wound. It's a promise. You protect me, I protect you. That's how this works now. She let herself be drawn onto the bed beside him, careful not to jostle his injuries. They lay face to face, and Helena marveled at how this man, this dangerous, powerful, complicated man, looked at her with such open vulnerability now. The walls he'd built over a lifetime had crumbled in the 4 days he'd spent healing, with her voice as his constant companion pulling him back from darkness. I killed him, Helena said quietly. I know Theo and the others took care of the scene, but I'm the reason Dimitri's dead. My wire, my testimony, No. Nicholas's voice was firm. I killed him. 3 shots, center mass. That was me, Helena, not you. You don't get to carry that guilt. But if you hadn't come into my warehouse bleeding 2 weeks ago, we wouldn't be here, If you hadn't been brave enough to face him, if you hadn't trusted me enough to let me protect you." He cupped her face with his good hand. "There are 1,000 ifs, but the only one that matters is this. If I had let him shoot you, I would have burned the entire city to the ground and then burned myself with it. So yes, I killed him, and I'd do it again, without hesitation." Helena searched his eyes for regret, for doubt, and found only certainty. This was who he was, a man who lived by his own code, who protected his own with absolute conviction. She'd never asked him to be anything different. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily now. "I've been telling you for 4 days while you were unconscious, but I wanted you to hear it while you could remember. I love you, Nicholas Drakos. All of you. The good and the complicated and the dangerous parts. Something raw and beautiful transformed his features. Say it again. I love you. Again, I love you." She kissed him softly, mindful of his injuries. "I love you, and I'm not going anywhere." "Sahi Mu," he breathed against her lips. "My soul. That's what you are. The part of me I thought I'd lost. You brought it back." They spent the rest of the day in bed, not making love but something perhaps more intimate. Talking. Sharing the pieces of themselves they'd been too afraid to reveal before. Nicholas told her about his mother's death, about his father's cold instruction in power, about the first man he'd killed, and how it had haunted him for years. Helena told him about the guilt she carried over her parents' deaths, the scholarships she'd abandoned, the life she'd thought she'd live before everything fell apart. And slowly, piece by piece, they built something new between them. Not a fairy tale romance, but something stronger, a partnership forged in blood and survival, in honesty and acceptance. A week later, Nicholas was well enough to walk the villa grounds, his arm in a sling but his spirits recovering. He found Helena in the garden where they'd first kissed, sitting beneath an olive tree with a book in her lap. The afternoon sun turned her hair to honey gold, and when she looked up and smiled at him, Nicholas felt something in his chest that had nothing to do with his healing wound. "Reading?" He sat beside her carefully. "Rereading. One of my favorites, The Odyssey." She showed him the cover. About a man trying to find his way home. "Have you found yours? Home, I mean." Helena looked at him for a long moment, then set the book aside. "I think home found me. In a warehouse in Piraeus, when a dangerous man decided I was worth saving. I'm not that dangerous," but he was smiling. "You took on bullets for me. That's pretty dangerous." She leaned her head on his good shoulder. "What happens now? The authorities will be watching you more closely after everything with Dmitri." "Let them watch." Nicholas's arm came around her waist. "The evidence says Dmitri was a dirty cop who got what he deserved. My lawyers have already filed the documentation. And more importantly, his department doesn't want the scandal of a deep investigation. They're eager to close the case." "So it's over?" "This chapter is." He tilted her face up to his. "But I've been thinking. About the future. About what I want that future to look like. And I want you in it. Not hiding, not just surviving. I want you to live again, Helena. Really live. Go back to school if you want. Open that bookshop you told me about. Build something that's yours." Helena's throat tightened. "And you? What do you want?" "I want to build something too. Something cleaner than what my father left me. I've spent 15 years running an empire built on violence and fear. Maybe it's time to try something different. Use all this power and money for something that matters." He paused. "With you beside me. If you'll have me. Is that a proposal?" Helena's heart was racing. "It's a promise. Propose comes later, when I can actually kneel without passing out, His smile was soft. But yes, eventually, I want you to be my wife. I want to wake up every morning and see you in my bed. I want to fight with you about small things and face the big things together. I want everything, Helena, with you. She kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into that kiss. Love and gratitude and hope and fierce, burning joy. When they finally broke apart, both smiling, the sun was setting over the Corinthian Gulf in shades of gold and orange that had become their signature backdrop. Okay, Helena said. Yes, to all of it. 3 months later, on a quiet winter morning, they stood in a small chapel overlooking the sea. Maria cried through the entire ceremony. Andreas served as best man, still grumbling about patients who wouldn't follow doctor's orders. Theo and Stavros provided security that no one needed, because the guest list was deliberately small. Helena wore a simple white dress and carried olive branches, for peace, for new beginnings. Nicholas wore a perfectly tailored suit with his hair slicked back and his wife's initials tattooed over his heart, right beside the olive branch he'd gotten the year before. They exchanged vows in Greek and English, promising to protect and cherish, to stand together against whatever came. And when the priest pronounced them married, when Nicholas kissed her with such tenderness that several guests applauded, Helena thought about the bullet that had changed everything, the violence that had led her to love, the darkness that had somehow illuminated the path to light. After the ceremony, they stood on the balcony of the villa, looking out over the water. Helena's hand rested on her husband's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. Over his heart, she could see the edge of new ink, her initials, HP, intertwined with an olive branch. No regrets? Nicholas asked, his arms wrapped around her from behind. Not even one. She turned in his embrace. You know what the strangest part is? I spent 2 years running from danger, trying to stay invisible, trying to stay safe. And then I ran straight into the most dangerous man in Greece, and for the first time since my parents died, I felt truly safe. That's because you saw past the reputation to the man underneath. Not many people do that. Then not many people deserve you. Helena reached up to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. But I do. We earned each other, Nicholas. Every bullet, every moment of fear, every choice we made, it all led here. He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm, right over the scar from where she'd pressed against her own wound the night they met. His shoulder still bore the mark of where he'd taken a bullet for her. They were both scarred now, both marked by the violence that had brought them together. But the scars were proof they'd survived, proof they'd fought for something worth keeping. As the sun set on their wedding day, painting the Corinthian Gulf in the colors that had witnessed their story from the beginning, Nicholas Drakos and Helena Papadakis, now Helena Drakos, held each other and looked toward the future they'd built from bullets and blood, from fear transformed into courage, from survival transformed into love. The Greek Mafia boss had found his soul, and the woman who'd stumbled bleeding into his warehouse had found her home. Not in spite of the danger, but because of the man who'd proven that even in the darkest corners of the world, love could still bloom, fierce and protective and absolutely unbreakable. Saihi Mu, he called her. My soul. And she finally understood that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is open your heart. But when you do it with the right person, when they catch you and hold you and take bullets for you, that danger transforms into something beautiful, into everything, into home.